Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a homemade mincemeat tart, and this is what it looks like. This tart has 2 layers of a buttery pastry, and as you can see on top, we're going to make pastry stars, and inside is this delicious homemade vegetarian-style mincemeat. You can serve this tart warm or at room temperature with or without a scoop of vanilla ice cream. So we're going to start by making our homemade mincemeat. I will say if you don't have time or you don't want to make it, you can just use store-bought. Actually, there's a lot of good brands out there, so don't worry if you don't want to bother making it. So this is homemade just mincemeat. It's actually a preserve. It's sweet and spicy. It's full of lots of dried fruits, some candied mixed peel. We've got some apples, some lemons, some nuts. It's just wonderful. The name mincemeat comes from the fact that mincemeat used to have meat in it. Today, typically it has beef suet in it, but we're making ours, as I said, vegetarian style. So actually we're just replacing the beef suet with butter. So what we're going to do is just mix everything together in a saucepan, because we're going to just gently heat it for about 10 minutes. So the first thing that you will need is 5 tablespoons, 70 grams of butter, and I didn't say, but homemade mincemeat or mincemeat is generously, I'll say, generously laced with alcohol, just so you know that. Next, you will need a half a cup, 110 grams of firmly packed brown sugar. And then you will need just 1 small apple peel cord, and then I just cut it into small pieces. You can really use any apple you want. I prefer like more of a tart tasting, a little bit of tartness. So I'm using a Granny Smith today. Let's dump that right in there. And then we are spicing this. So, I mean, you can vary this if you want, add more or less. But I'm adding a half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon and a 1/4 of a teaspoon of freshly grated nutmeg, a 1/4 of a teaspoon of ground ginger, and just an 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground cloves. And then I have a 1/4 of a teaspoon of just salt. So for our dried fruits, we have lots. I have a half a cup, 90 grams of, I'm using the dark raisins, a half a cup, 90 grams of the golden raisins, and a half a cup, 90 grams of, you can use, I'm using dried cranberries, dried cherries, and you can vary this up or add different ones, different dried fruits, but this is kind of my standard recipe. And a half a cup, which is 75 grams of dried currants, and a half a cup, 80 grams of, I'm using candied mixed peel. I think it has some those candied cherries in there. Love those things. If you don't, some people don't like candied mixed peel. You can leave it out. Maybe add a bit more dried fruit. And then I'm just adding a 1/4 of a cup, which is 25 grams of chopped nuts. I'm using pecans. You could use almonds, would be good, or walnuts. And that's all that. And just one thing left, a lemon. The grated, I'm going to use, first I'm going to do the zest plus the juice of either, I'm using a lemon today. You could use an orange. Wash your fruit first, and then I'm using a microplane. You could just use a box grater to grate the zest. As you can see, lots of good stuff. I can just eat this by the spoonful. Good over ice cream too. Okay. And then I'm just gonna, you can see what I'm doing here. and cut it in half. Because I'm going to use my fancy thing here. I bought this juice squeezer. You could just do it by hand, but this gadget, if you're into kitchen gadgets, which I must admit I am, and then you just press down. I'll tell you, this tool is great if you ever make key lime pie with those key limes, those little tiny ones. This makes quick work of it. Okay, that's that. So now, essentially, all we're going to do is put this on the heat over medium heat. Stir it once in a while till the butter melts. And then I'm going to turn it down to low and just let it simmer 10 minutes. That's it. It's not difficult. Just stir it every once in a while. Okay, so mincemeat has been cooking about 10 minutes. Doesn't that look gorgeous? You see everything's mixed together. There's a little juice there. So now we need some alcohol. You will need a scant half a cup, about 100 milliliters, 100 grams of alcohol. There's different choices, you know, whatever you like or whatever you have in the house. You could use rum. You could use whiskey, you could use brandy, sherry. I sometimes add a little splash of Grand Marnier. I'm actually using whiskey today, kind of like that. Oh. When the whiskey hits the warm mincemeat, really smell it. So now, we can't use this right away. We want to cool it down to room temperature and then cover it and put it into the refrigerator. Now you could maybe chill it for 4 to 6 hours and actually use it on the same day you make it. But the great part is you can leave this in the fridge for 3 to 4 weeks. So it's something that you can make it way ahead of time, and then all you want to do when you make the tart is make the pastry, assemble it, and you're done. The only thing is, if you're leaving it there for, more than a week, what I like to do once, twice a week is to go check it, give it a good stir, and if it looks a little dry, then just add a splash or two of, whatever you're using, whiskey or whatever, just to keep it hydrated. I know people are going to ask, how do I make this alcohol free? Honestly, I have never made it without the alcohol. You could, it's just a mixture of dried fruit and all that. You could just make it, chill it down and then fill your tart with that. But you couldn't store your fruit mixture, the mixture in the fridge like 3 to 4 weeks like you can when you put alcohol in it, because alcohol is a preservative. So that's all I can say. I have never actually tried it, but I don't see why you can't just chill it down till it gets nice and thick and then just use it that way. But that's what I'm going to do. And next up, we're going to make our butter pastry. So now for our pastry. As I said, this is an all butter pastry. So, when you bake it off, it's wonderfully crisp. I just love it. So I'm making my pastry in my food processor. You could make it by hand as well, just in a bowl. The first thing that you will need is 2 2/3 cups, which is 350 grams of all-purpose flour, plain flour. And you will need 1 teaspoon, 4 grams. I'm using a fine kosher salt here. And then I'm adding 1 tablespoon, 15 grams of granulated white sugar. I just like a little bit of sugar in my butter pastry. Some people don't. If you don't, you can just leave it out. Either way. And I'm just going to process this. If you were doing it by hand, just stir it with your hand or fork. And then butter. we will need 1 cup, 225 grams. I'm using unsalted butter, and you want it cold. That's what's going to give us that beautiful, crisp texture of our pastry. If you remember the night before, then just take your butter and cut it into cubes like this, and then cover it, plastic wrap, and put it in the fridge. And that way, each little one gets really cold. Sometimes I forget, so I do it in the morning, and then you could just pop it into the freezer for about 10 minutes, and it gets really cold too. So let's put that right in there. If you were making it by hand, you can just work the butter into the flour mixture with your fingers, or if you have one of these pastry blenders, that's really good too. It's normally what I use. So what we're going to do is just process this, I mean maybe 10 seconds, just until it's coarse crumbs. There may be some larger, when you're done, some larger chunks of butter. Don't worry about that. That's actually a good thing. So. I'm going to check it. Yeah, I'm good with that. That was that 10 seconds? As you can see, coarse crumbs. I can feel some larger chunks of butter, like that. You can see that. That's okay. So now, we need to add some water to bind everything together. So what I do is just have a measuring cup, and I put some ice cubes in there and then water, so it's really nice and icy cold. The thing with pastry is cold. So depending on your flour, how it's stored, transported and all that, it can absorb different amounts of water. So I'm going to say you'll probably need somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 cup, which is 60 to 100 milliliters or grams. I like to use a tablespoon. I'm going to start with about almost 6, 2, 3, 4, almost 6 tablespoons. I would have said that before, but I didn't want to mess up my counting. So that's just a scant 6. So what we want is the flour to be moistened, not wet, so it will hold together. So I'm just going to pulse this. You don't want a solid ball of dough. You just want, when you squeeze it together, it'll hold. So just going to scrape it down. If you were doing this by hand, just add your butter and then just toss it. I usually use like a fork. When the sound, you start to get a different sound when it starts to come together. That's when I stop, and then I just want to feel it and see if I need to add any more water. So just take it and feel it. It holds together, but when I'm feeling it, it feels a little dry to me. And if you don't add enough water, what happens is when you try to roll it out, it might crack. So I'm just going to add, another scant tablespoon. See how that works. Yeah. That it feels moist and doesn't feel the flour. I don't feel any dryness. So we are done. So that would be almost 7 for mine, just to give you kind of a reference point. But like I said, you know, the flour, how it's transported and all that, it can vary. So now we are going to, because we got a top and a bottom layer, we're going to divide it in half. I'm actually using my scale, so that would be about 325 grams per half. If you don't have a scale, you'll just have to eyeball it, which is fine. So just kind of gather it into a crumbs, and I have my scale. Okay, so what I like to do, I'm going to wrap it in plastic. But first, I kind of, just to make sure it's moistened, I kind of get it into a ball like this, and then I just kind of, the heel of my hand, and then that way I make sure that all the flour is moistened. And then I'm just going to take a piece of plastic wrap, put it in the center, do it into a round, and then we have to chill it. You know, the butter, so the butter firms up, kind of relaxes the gluten in the flour, makes it much easier to roll out. I'm going to say, you know, anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. And when we come back, we will roll it out and put it into our pan. So now our pastry has chilled, so we are ready to roll it out. But first, you will need a 9-inch, that's 23 centimeter tart pan with a removable bottom. And what I like to do is I'm just going to spray it with one of these non-stick sprays. Or you could lightly oil it or even butter it, the bottom plate, so that our pastry doesn't stick. And then I don't want too much, just a light coating. So I'm just going to take a paper towel and wipe that, like so. Okay, so now we are ready to roll out our pastry. So if it's really cold and you can't roll it, just let it sit on your counter 5-10 minutes and then it'll be ready. So you will need a lightly floured surface. And I'm just going to lightly flour the top. And your rolling pin, you could do that too. Whenever you're rolling pastry, important thing is to keep lifting and turning. That way, if it's sticking, you can put down some more flour. So we're going to roll this pretty thin, between what, 1/8 and 1/4 inch. Okay, it looks about right. You know, it's hard sometimes to get it into a really nice round. You can go as you're rolling and kind of even up, but as you can see, it's not perfect, but it doesn't have to be. So just roll your hand over the top, and then you can kind of see if it's even thickness, because that's the important thing. I'm just going to lift this up, make sure it's not sticking, and then take your plate and you can put it on there. It should be a couple inches beyond, like, you know, about 5 centimeters beyond the plate, so that'll go up the sides. And right here is a little thick. So then what I like to do is to take my bottom plate and slip it under till it's about the center. And then I just kind of pick it up and put it into my plate. I mean, you can, I used to roll it on, you know, around my rolling pin and do it. I find this way is better, easier for me. So now we've got it like this. So now just kind of gently push the sides down. So we want to make sure the edges are right up. So if it does crack, do not worry. Just, piece it back together with your fingers. No big deal. Nobody's going to know when we have the finished tart. So that looks pretty good. So now just take your finger and go around the inside to make sure it's in the corners there. And then I just kind of, you can take your rolling pin, or sometimes I just go with my hand, or you can take your rolling pin and just roll it over the top. Right there. And it'll just go right away like that. So that's our bottom crust. I'm going to cover that, put that in the refrigerator, come back, we will do the top layer. Okay, so second round of pastry. Didn't think you wanted to watch me again roll it out. So I've rolled it out again to that thickness, a quarter to, an eighth to a quarter inch. And you don't have to worry so much about the shape here because we are going to make the top is pastry stars. So could you do another type? Yes, you could. You could do just a solid piece of dough, pastry on top. You could do a lattice, whatever you want. But I kind of like the stars. So I'm using, you could use any size stars, cookie cutters. This is about a 2.5 inch, which is about 6.5 centimeters. Actually, I do kind of a combo, the large, and then I like to put a few little ones. But like I said, you can do whatever you want. So I have a baking sheet here. I've lined it with parchment paper. You could just put wax paper and then just cut out the stars. I find if you're using about this size, I like to have about 20 cut out. And then if you want to do the small ones, a whole bunch of those. You probably won't need all 20, but you wreck one or something, it's always better to have extra with anything. So just cut them out and then, cut through all the way. And then, you probably have to re-roll your scraps and cut out some more. Okay, so have lots to work with here. So there we have it. There will be leftover scraps of pastry. Do not throw them out because we are going to have a little extra mincemeat. So what I do is I either make miniature mince pies, or even you can use like a regular muffin pan, a little bigger size. So you'll have lots of mincemeat tarts. So what I'm going to do now is cover this with plastic wrap and then put it into the refrigerator to chill because we want all our pastry cold when it hits the oven. And while that's happening, because I would say about 20 minutes, 20, 30 minutes, while that's happening, you want to preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 200 degrees Celsius. So when we come back, we will assemble and bake off our mincemeat tart. So our oven is preheated, our pastry is chilled, we're ready to assemble our tart. So what I did is put my tart pan on a larger baking sheet. It's much easier to pick it up and move it into the oven. So the first thing is our mincemeat, which is here. It's chilled. I give it a good stir. Now you will need 3 cups of mincemeat, which is about 650 grams. The recipe that we made makes 3 3/4 cups, which is around 850 grams. So you will have a little extra. So like I said, you have this pastry scraps, you have a little extra mincemeat, make yourself some extra tarts. Give it a good stir, and if it's a little dry, just give it a little splash of alcohol, whatever you're using. Extra flavor. So now I'm just gonna Oh, it just smells wonderful. To me, you know, Christmas, I love mincemeat tarts. Small ones, a large one, whatever. So, and then just take and spread it out. So you want it to come pretty close to the top. If you didn't have like exactly 3 cups, a little less, that's okay. You know, if it's a little less. And of course, if you want to use store-bought, you know, don't feel bad. Just, what I like to do, if you buy the store-bought, is I like to put grate an apple, tart, like more tart tasting apple, and mix that into the store-bought mincemeat, and then, you know, maybe add a splash or 2 of alcohol as well. You can doctor it a little and make it even better. So just kind of pat it down, make sure it's okay. So that's good. And then what I like to do is take 1 tablespoon of cold butter, that's about 14 grams, cut it into these little tiny cubes and just kind of put them over the top. That's going to add a little more flavor, moisture to our mincemeat. Do you have to do this? No, but sometimes I forget. But if you don't forget, it's a good idea. Actually, you know, for a lot of your fruit pies, this is a good idea to put just a little bit of butter. Okay. Good. Then I have 1 large egg yolk that's about, you know, 17, 18 grams. And I'm just going to add about 1 tablespoon of cream or milk, whatever you have. Just whisk that together. This is going to be our egg wash. It gives our pastry stars a nice shine, and it helps them turn like a beautiful golden brown. You know, some people just use milk or cream, not the egg yolk, but it gives it a wonderful look. So then, pastry brush. What I'm going to do is just do the rim here, because it's going to act like as a glue for our outside pastry stars. Now, some people put their stars or their pastry on top and then brush it with their egg wash. I find I prefer to do my brushing like before. I just find it easier. You can do it whatever way you want. So I'll just show you what I'm doing here. So just press one of the tips of the pastry into the outside crust like that. And then we're just going to kind of, I like to overlap them a bit. I like to have some space so you can see the filling. So you can do it like as close together or as far apart as you want here. And all I'm going to do is just work my way around and then in the center. Okay, so I filled it all in. So if you did, like I did here, and you have some small ones, you can just, you know, decorate it how you want. Okay, you can get carried away. So that, I'm just going to leave it like that. And then the final touch, if you want, this is kind of an optional thing. I'm putting some sparkling sugar, just to give it a little sparkle. You could use some granulated white sugar, or you could just not put any sugar. So there we go. Our tart is ready to be baked. I'm going to say around 30 minutes, could be 25, could be 35, depending on your oven. Everybody's oven is a little different. But mainly, it's all about, how it looks. The crust will be a beautiful golden brown, and the mincemeat filling will start to bubble up around the edges and even in the center. So that, in my oven, it's around 30 minutes. I do rotate my baking sheet front to back about halfway through. Okay, so our mincemeat tart is done. Doesn't it look just gorgeous? So put your baking sheet on a wire rack. As you can see, the pastry starts beautiful golden brown and our mincemeat is bubbling. So, of course, I just want to let it cool down to room temperature. When you want to take off the tart ring, what I do is just put it on top of just a little dish like that, and then the outside ring will just fall right off. So when we come back, we will try a piece. So now, if you want to serve it, you could dust the top with some powdered sugar. Kind of looks like snow. And while I'm not going to have it today, it's always good with some whipped cream or ice cream. But we'll be good and we'll just have taste the tart today. And this freezes really well. So if you want to make it like way ahead. But the thing is, we can make our mincemeat way ahead, like I said, close to a month, and then you could just bake off the tart, the day or a couple days before you want it. So there we have it. I think it's just gorgeous. Oh. That's wonderful. I mean, years and years ago when I was younger, I never made my own mincemeat. I just, bought it, and I really liked either mincemeat tart, mince pies. But now that I make my own mincemeat, it just takes it to a whole another level. So really, give it a try. You'll never go back. It's, the butter pastry. It's kind of crisp. It's buttery. And, it may seem like there's a thin layer of filling, mincemeat compared to, you got top and bottom pastry crust, but the filling is quite dense, and there's so much flavor and texture to that really the balance between the pastry and filling is, to me, just perfect. Now you have that leftover, it's the pastry, and you got some leftover mincemeat. So I like to make the little miniature mince pies. So you can go to joybaking.com, either our YouTube channel or our website, and I have a recipe to make those. So you can have lots of mincemeat tarts. And I also have, if you're really into mincemeat, I have a mincemeat cake. You might want to check out. It even has some marzipan in it, so it's really good. Right, check that. So you can cover and store this quite a few days, either room temperature or in the refrigerator. You can freeze it, And some people, I'll just bring this up again, some people that are subscribers, and thank you very much for subscribing, but they're saying they're not getting notified when we put out a video almost every Thursday, and some people say they never get notified. So beside the subscriber button, there's a little bell, so if you press that, it's supposed to make doubly sure that you do get notified. But typically Thursday morning, that's when we put one out. So you must try this, and until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.